For this question, we're going to take a look at a few approaches. We'll start with what I believe is the most effective approach, and that's going to be using Desmos here. So we're going to go ahead and scroll over. We'll go to the upper right corner, which is where Desmos is located. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize our graphing calculator on the left here. And when we go into Desmos, let me zoom back out, which you can use Control minus if you want on your keyboard. Or if you have a touch screen, just kind of zoom in and out, touching the screen. Now, if you have any other functions from a previous problem, you can click the gear icon, click delete all, and then we have it ready to go. Now, there are two approaches for using Desmos here. And I'll talk about my preferred approach, but I'll show you both. So because of the fact that there's a variable on each side of the equal sign, in that scenario, I'm going to go ahead and put in each of the two functions as separate equations. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and put this first function. Now let me go ahead and bring up the Desmos keypad down here. And it only lets you do so if you really have enough room. So you kind of have to zoom out a bit. And then now I'm going to go ahead and type in the square root, which is right down here. 2x plus 20. So I like to use my keyboard quite a bit, but you can obviously be using this keypad as well. We'll go ahead and press enter, and then we'll do the second function. So we have x minus 2. And the goal here is to find the point or points at which these two functions intersect. So really to get a good viewing window, let's go ahead here and I'm going to zoom out. And I can see they only cross at that one point. So let me zoom back in. And personally, I like to go to this gear icon and change it to this option. Notice if I had it on this one, it's just a little faint. It's not really as bold and easy to read. So I like this one better. And we'll go ahead and click here to find the point of intersection. And what matters is the x coordinate. So the x coordinate is 8. So if they say, what is the sum, which means the answer to an addition problem, for all the solutions, well, there's just the one solution. So 8 added to nothing gives you the answer as 8. And we'd be done and be able to move on. But just so that you can see other approaches, if instead you had set this entire equation in this first line here, instead you'd be trying to find where that one function crosses the x-axis, because a solution to one equation is the same as just saying the x-intercept. You could zoom out, same thing, and you could see it's just that one point, which is right here. And we'll zoom in a little bit further to make it clearer. And it's at x equals 8. So that's the only solution. You get the same thing. For me personally, when there's an x on both sides, I like to make them two separate functions. And to kind of show you a different scenario of where I would put the whole thing as one equation, this question here, because it only has variables on the left side, not on the right, I would put that whole thing as one equation on the first line and find where it crosses the x-axis. So finding the x-intercept. But again, because the question that we're doing right here has a variable on both sides, I liked to separate them into two functions, just like we did in that first approach. Now, in case you're wondering, well, how could you do it by hand? I don't recommend it. However, I do think it's valuable to show you the algebra here because I think it also helps you appreciate just how powerful Desmos is on a question like this. So to undo a square root, we square both sides. That gets rid of the square and square root. We end up getting 2x plus 20 on the left side. On the right side, this is really the same as saying x minus 2 times itself. When you FOIL, you get x squared minus 2x, so minus 4x, and plus 4. Now keep in mind in algebra, there's always two scenarios. You could have one type of x. In that case, you get x's to one side, numbers to the other. If instead you have more than one type of x, you want to get everything equal to 0 so that eventually you could factor and solve. And notice in our case, we have more than one type of x. We have x to the second power as well as to the first power. So we're going to go ahead and get everything equal to 0. More specifically, I like the leading coefficient to be positive. So I'm going to move everything to the right side. And I like to put the terms under their like terms to make it a little bit easier for myself on the next step. I get 0 equals x squared minus 6x minus 16. Now, I'm sure you could factor it by hand. However, it's always good to know what resources we have. And we do have one of our top 5 programs as Quadratic Solver. We'll go in, type in the coefficients. Remember, you're going to use a negative, this key down here, whenever it's a negative term. Same thing here for negative 16. We get our two solutions. Now, something that is important, if I added these two solutions, I would get positive 6 as my answer, which is not correct. So the fact that when I used Desmos, I only got a solution of 8 really made it a superior approach because I didn't fall for any trap. But if you were doing it by hand, what you would need to do at this point is plug in each of these and see if either one gives you what we call an extraneous solution. So notice if I plug in negative 2 minus 2 is negative 4. Now it's impossible to take the square root of something and get a negative. What would happen is you'll end up getting 4 on the left side and negative 4 on the right side. So notice negative 2 times 2 is negative 4, plus 20 is 16, the square root of which is 4, and those are not equal to each other. So we consider negative 2 extraneous. If you plug in 8, notice you're going to get 6 on the right side, and then you get 2 times 8, which is 16, plus 20 is 36, the square root of which is also 6. So that works out. So that ends up meaning that your only valid solution is 8.